My name's Rob Solt. Most of you know me. I'm in charge of our workers' compensation administrative section. And this is April Renner, who's our newest lawyer. She started with us in January. And April's very unique. We've interviewed a lot of people over... No, you are.
Is that a good thing?
Absolutely. April is the first person I've ever interviewed, and a lot of you will understand this, that truly, truly wanted to do workers' compensation. Let's have a round of applause. Because everyone in this room knows if you want to do workers' compensation, you're a strange person. But she fits perfectly in our world. All right, idiopathic injuries, and I just got to tell you this. I saw my soon to be 87-year-old mother a couple days ago. I was in Mansfield hearing, stopped in, and she said, "What's going on this week?" I said, "Well, we have our firm seminar." She says, "What are you going to talk about?" And I said, "You don't want to know, Mom." She says, "Yeah, really, what?" "Idiopathic injuries." She paused and looked at me and says, "Injuries for idiots?" I then tried to explain to her what I was going to say, and her eyes glazed over, and hopefully that won't be what happens here today. We have a good presentation. Get your phones ready. We're going to be polling, and once again, this is anonymous, but we're going to ask you a lot of questions. Idiopathic injury. What?
We back up the slide.
Oh, I did. Went the wrong way. All right. Carrie, make the next slide go, would you please? Then I'll go the right way. Okay, for an injury to be compensable in Ohio, what has to happen? It must occur in the course of, and it must arise out of the employment. You know, arising out of employment means there's a causal connection to being at work. You're at work, something happens. An idiopathic injury occurs when it does not arise out of the employment. There's some other reason. That something is usually a pre-existing physical condition, or there's no specific hazard of the employment. Darn it. All right.
Okay, so idiopathic injuries are generally compensable, but there is
I pushed it.
an exception.
And the exception is?
So if there's something that's particular to the employment environment, a particular condition that increases the risk of an injury or makes the injury more dangerous, then that injury may be compensable. So we're going to talk about two different scenarios. The first one is an idiopathic injury. The second one is an idiopathic injury with that added condition. And these are real injuries. As you see, there are case citations which indicate they're real injuries. So in the first one, an employee falls on the floor of the restroom of the place where she works while she's having a heart attack. That is an idiopathic injury. There's nothing about the floor of the place where she works that is different, that would elevate the risk that she's going to hurt herself. And then in a second scenario, an employee's having a seizure. As he falls, he hits his head on a welding machine. That welding machine is a condition particular to that employment environment that makes his injury more dangerous. That injury is going to be compensable.
Unfortunately, these are not privy just to Whirlpool. They happen everywhere. In fact, I'll tell you, I was talking with Megan Reed earlier. I think we've had more idiopathic injuries in the last year than we've had in a long time. I can honestly say we've probably had 30 to 40 of them in our office in the last year, and that's just a lot of these scenarios. So what's the case law on all this stuff? Where does this all come from? Well, there's a Supreme Court case called the Waller case, and some of you have probably heard us talk about that, the Waller doctrine. And essentially, Waller was a case where a guy was at work, and he walked up about 3 steps like this. His knee gave out, and he was hurt. And so the question on all this was, when you have that type of situation, is it compensable or is it not compensable? He's clearly at work, but did it arise out of work? Waller had a pre-existing knee problem. And what the courts have said is that it is Waller's responsibility, the injured worker's responsibility, to disprove the idiopathic cause. So was it because of his knee, or was it just because it was because? So when you look at this, he must prove or rule out the idiopathic cause. Now, if he does that, there's an inference that it was due to a risk of the employment. However, it has to also, as you'll see some of the clips we're going to show here in a little bit, it has to be some hazard of the employment. You know, there's not a risk of walking across the floor at work. If the floor isn't slippery, there's not a hole in the floor or something else. That's nothing, there's no hazard. So you have to look at every case on a case-by-case basis. This is going to be our first clip, and this is the fun part. Now, we have a lot of Ohio State people here. We have a lot of Michigan people here. We have a lot of Michigan State people here. So if I make fun of this Michigan person, I at least got 2/3 of the room that likes me, okay? A government official, used to be president of the United States, has a history of a knee injury while playing football at that school up north. And he also was famous for being clumsy. But I will say, in President Ford's defense, he was an All-American football player at Michigan. Too bad for him. Well, anyway, get out your phones. We're going to vote on these. We're going to have 2 clips about President Ford. We want to know whether you think they're compensable.
Raindrops kept falling on their heads as Gerald and Betty Ford arrived in Austria. And President Ford kept falling on his head, first in Salzburg in front of Austrian Chancellor Kreisky. All right, thanks for...
All right, what do you think? Compensable, not compensable?
Okay, so the steps of Air Force One, that's the employment environment. And we know that Ford has pre-existing knee problems. That would be an idiopathic cause. But we have the added element that there's water on the steps from the rain. So what do you think, Rob? Is that a hazard of employment?
You know, I don't want Michigan to win anything. Sorry for the Michigan fans, but probably not. I don't think so. I think that's part of the employment environment. I think that probably that's not going to work here. Now, this is number 2.
In Michigan, on a trip up the same stairs.
First question I have, we're going to poll here, but as you're polling, does anybody have a sport coat like that? And if you do, leave right now. Because I did have one. All right, so most of you say that's not compensable, huh? What do you say, April?
I would agree completely. There's nothing on the stairs that we can see. They're not wet. There's not oil, nothing. He just probably fell because of his pre-existing injuries. So definitely idiopathic injury, not compensable.
Now let me add one thing here. When we say definitely, in Toledo, Ohio, or in the Industrial Commission, Ohio, that means maybe. One of the factors that you have on this is wherever you are, you're having a human being decide these situations. And when a human being decides things, you get different answers. Workers' compensation in Ohio is a no-fault system, right? That's what we have. When you're talking about idiopathic, what are you really doing? You're sort of apportioning fault, aren't you? So it's a little different concept, and it's something different than the Industrial Commission has to do here.
Okay, next video. Matt Foley, a very interesting motivational speaker. He lives in a van down by the river. He has a history of high blood pressure. He's also very hyper, and that might be because before he gives a talk, he drinks 10 shots of espresso and also eats a dozen donuts to get himself in the zone. In this video, he's talking to 2 teenagers, trying to get them back on track, and he falls into a table. Is his claim compensable?
Young lady, what do you want to do with your life?
I want to live in a van down by the river.
Well, you'll have plenty of time to live in a van down by the river when you're living in a van down by the river. Now, you kids are probably asking yourselves, hey, Matt, how can we get back on the right track? Well, as I see it, there is only one solution. And that is for me to get my gear, move it on in here, because I'm going to bunk with you, buddy. We're going to be buddies. We're going to be pals. We're going to wrestle around. Old Matt's going to be your shadow. Here's you, here's Matt. There's you, there. Whoops-a-daisy.
All right, what's everybody think? Compensable, not compensable? Well, I agree with the room, so you guys are getting you get to understand us better. You do, Mark and Rob back there. I don't think it's compensable. I think in this situation, there's really no specific hazard of the employment. He's taking caffeine, eating cookies, doing all the things that we just all did, and fell. What do you think, April?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you could say maybe the table's part of his employment environment, but there's tables all over the place. It's nothing particular, not a hazard in most situations.
All right. I don't think it's a hazard either, but that's a fact that could be debated, whether the table created some specific hazard in the workplace, the house, as he's motivating these young teenagers down by the river. Okay, next one. This is one of my favorite all-time shows as a kid growing up. Most of you remember Sanford and Son, I imagine. Fred is the father, Lamont's the son, and he has a long time history of having cardiac events. During a discussion with Lamont over profits, he becomes stressed and says he's having a heart attack.
Give me my money. No, I said no. No, I want my money. I said no. Partner, get out of here. You went and did it. I might need that money tonight. I've never had pains like this before. Oh, this is the worst one I ever had, son. Oh, it's the worst one. This is the big one. I'm dying. You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey. Oh. Maybe that's Elizabeth.
All right, what's everybody think about this one? Other than that, it was a great show. All right, 94% of you say not compensable. What say you, April?
I say not compensable. Fred's heart attack was caused by stress. An injury caused by stress is not compensable unless the person is exposed to more stress than is normal in the workplace.
Well, it sounded pretty stressful to me. I think the other thing to remember in a situation like this is Fred really wasn't injured, I don't think. I mean, I don't think Fred had anything other than theatrics on mind in this case.
Okay, next video. U2's guitarist David Evans is nicknamed The Edge. And in this clip, he's playing a song, gets lost in the moment, and happens to fall off the edge of the stage. Is his claim compensable?
Wait for it.
And again.
And again. All right, what's everybody think? You know, you guys are a lot smarter for us than you were for them.
I know.
Just saying. Yeah, I think this is compensable. I think the stage is not something that is typical in everybody's house or every building. So I think that would probably constitute a hazard of the employment when they fell down. But it's a good video, isn't it? Excuse me?
OSHA.
They should have been. And you know, the other thing we didn't talk about on this is with this and some of the Chris Farley stuff, Drugs are probably an issue. Yeah, how dare. All right. Is this me, I guess?
This is you.
Oh, this is me. Dim-witted, it's me, I guess. Okay, a dim-witted and often clumsy campaign official is passing out promotional litter for his brother who happens to be running for governor. His name is not something DeWine or whoever's running here. Anyway, while making the rounds to a house off in the distance, he decides that every vote counts. And on his way, he suffers 1, not 2, but 3 falls. Are any of these compensable?
Vote for Donnelly! Every vote counts.
What do you think? April?
All right, I think this is a classic idiopathic injury. The path to the house is his employment environment. There's nothing that you can see that's really elevates the risk. I think he's just clumsy, not paying attention.
The other question that would come up in something like this, he's a campaign guy. Is he getting paid? Is he actually an employee? So that would be another question in this, but I agree, I don't think this is a compensable situation. Now let's assume he's an employee, he's on the clock, he's getting paid. He's out on this situation and this happens. All right, what do people think on that? Is there a difference, a distinction?
What do you think, Rob?
I think arguably in this particular case, the root gave way. The root theoretically could be a hazard of the employment, so this is arguably compensable. There's something there that's different that would be somewhere else, even though he's out in the public. But the public area would be his workplace in this particular situation. You agree or disagree? Mm-hmm. You better agree. All right. Number 3.
Thank you, little roots. Please stay strong.
What do people think? Wow.
Okay, are we done already?
I think I misspoke on the first one. The second video really was a rock, not a root. The concept's the same, and I think probably both of those, there's an argument they're compensable because there is some specific hazard, at least arguably. And the point is, it is definitely an arguable issue, a factual determination. Okay, what do we want to get out of all this? Workers' compensation, as I said, is a no-fault system. Idiopathic injuries looks at fault. When you have something that happens at work and there's no real explanation for it, somebody's walking across the floor and they fall. Why did they fall? Was the floor wet? Was there a piece of pipe on the floor? Was there a different type of mat? Was there anything along those lines there? Does a person have a pre-existing condition that may have contributed to it? You know, in today's world, we replace knees as much as we chew gum. We do all type of joint replacements and all types of things. So is there some reason that would account for the activity happening? Now, obviously, if somebody's bending down to pick up wood or a part off the floor, or they fall off a catwalk, or they slip on oil, all those things are a different scenario. But there's a lot of things we don't know why they happen. In Ohio, you're still allowed to be stupid and do stupid things and have a compensable injury. But in Ohio, If there's not a connection to the work, it's not compensable. So investigate your claims, make determinations, and I think you can really help control some of the workers' compensation costs that you all incur. Any questions? I guess we'll take questions afterwards.